You're listening to the Voice of Russia in the heart of London. I'm Tim Walklate, and today I'm hosting a debate asking, could the line between humans and machines soon be blurred? In the past week, a Russian entrepreneur has announced his plans to transplant human brains into robots within the next 10 years. His scheme, named the Avatar Project, comes when the London-based Nuffield Council on Bioethics is launching a consultation to consider the ethical dilemmas posed by the ways technology can intervene in the brain. Today I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Stuart Armstrong from the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University. His research focuses on the risks and possibilities of artificial intelligence, the long-term potential for intelligent life, and anthropic probability. Professor Atta Badi is also here. He's the chair of the International Companion Robotics Institute at the University of Reading, and he's also the director of the Intelligent Systems Research Laboratory. Jack Schofield is also here. He's the computer editor of The Guardian newspaper. And joining us on the phone is Father Georgy Zavashinsky from the Russian Orthodox Mission in Belfast. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
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 So, gentlemen, thanks for coming. Very briefly, I'd like to ask each of you in turn, do you want to live forever? So, Stuart, I'll ask you that first.
I'd like to hold my great-great-grandchildren and have many careers and adventures and be amongst the planets and see the rings of Saturn and hopefully see us solve all the world's problems.
Very good, excellent. And Professor Atta Badi?
Well, I suppose it would be as an ex-human, from an agency theory, it can become problematic because I'd feel that I'd be all knowledgeable and powerful and possibly become unpredictable as a personality. I wouldn't know if I were to be an ethical hazard. I'll have to see. But actually, I don't think I would like to live forever.
And Jack?
I'm in two minds as well. It would be very handy if you could kind of turn yourself on and off. You know, if you could come back in 100 years or 1,000 years and have a look round for a couple of years and then go back to sleep. But it would depend. I mean, I assume I'd be impossibly rich due to compound interest, so I wouldn't have to worry about food or whatever.
Father Georgy?
I am a priest, and I'm dealing with that matter every day, proclaiming, speaking, thinking, and everything which is about eternal life. So I'm so very much accustomed with that matter, and it is not a question for me. It shouldn't be a question, actually. Whether you like or not to live forever. It's outside. It's apart from your will. You will live forever. So I would like to live forever.
Okay. So some food for thought there. So let's begin by hearing about the Avatar project from Dmitry Itskov himself. Earlier he spoke to my colleague Tim Eckott, who began by asking him how his idea to preserve human consciousness in a robot body came about.
In my studies, in my research, I rely on scientists. So this project started with a theory of one Russian scientist who claims that our brain can live much longer than now. So the project, which is about brain transplanting, is at the stage of, I would say, pre-production. So we are considering some proposals, some projects from the scientists. The active studies, active research is being done Avatar A and Avatar C, which is the human-like robot, and reverse engineering for the brain.
Now, obviously, you must be aware that this kind of research raises a lot of ethical issues. How do you feel about those issues?
This is absolutely clear for me, and in general strategy, which is Avatar, we want to develop even new ethics for the humanity. As to this particular research, I suppose that those people who are at the age of dying will choose continue living using such technology, and it will be more ethical to let them live longer and more than let them die.
It is a dream, and you are obviously a pioneer, but pioneers often get called crazy. Are you prepared for that?
I'm not afraid because I believe in those ideas. I will do my best to make this dream come true. I want to help people. I want to help disabled people. I want to help people who actually don't want to die. So I'm not afraid of being called crazy. Every such idea at the very beginning was called crazy, but then some of such ideas really helped people.
Dmitry Idskov explaining his dream to my colleague Tim Eckert. So, Atta, do you think that this sort of idea could become a reality in 10 years' time?
Leaving aside for a moment the question of how to keep the beheadedness of the brain from itself, there's a physical and psychological trauma associated with displacement. There is this almost certain drastic displacement of sense of self and self-ideal or self-image and mutuality with other humans. After all, humans are social beings. There's definitely going to be a challenge organizing what we have, which is a continuous conversation between the brain and its embodiment. Brain has adapted to actually, over human evolution, to actually be best specialized for the kind of posture we have and this sort of emotional intelligence, micro gestures, and all sorts of things that we want to convey. And it's difficult to see how these challenges can be overcome in an embodiment, which is a robotic embodiment. But there are ethical issues, and they are about, for example, on the one hand, a motorcycle is certainly more than the sum of its parts. So the reductionist, fabrication of some components for a brain, certainly the psyche of a human being, it cannot be reduced to those kind of levels of analysis. But all in all, human society, when, as this is kind of projecting, faced with a situation of some celebrity must-haves, perhaps having this kind of becoming ex-humans who are going to live forever, and the rest ordinary mortals, certainly for the foreseeable future after this kind of future shock. And essentially, from my standpoint, I actually very much support research into robotics and brain-computer interface, but really for three things. First of all, for the D tasks, the dirty, demeaning, dangerous, and stuff that's drudgery for humans to do 24/7. And secondly, for rehabilitative robotics, for overcoming the long-term therapy challenges of people with motor neuron disease, congenital impairments of neurophysiological function, and Parkinson's, etc. And finally, we have a demographic trend towards increasingly older people needing essentially care support in some conditions where there's cognitive deficit, such as Alzheimer's. And so for those three types of, I believe that this research in advanced robotics and BCI, brain-computer interface, is very interesting, but for specific issues. And this is, to me, a little bit above my, horizon in terms of feasibility.
You're kind of bringing in the topic of kind of intervening with the brain specifically, which is possibly more closer to reality than maybe than maybe Mr. Idskov's idea. But Stuart, I mean, what are the ethical issues? You brought up Atta brought up ethics. What are the ethical issues from your point of view?
Well, I don't think the ethical issues are as strong as Atta implied. Especially, say, the division between the have and have-nots. If a lot of people want it, the price goes down. It's the kind of thing that happens with any medical intervention. And all the issues of embodiment, yes, it's important, yes, it's a challenge. But we already have paraplegics, for instance, and people like that who show that you can function basically just with your brain. Okay, hormones and a few minor details like that, but it definitely seems possible to function just with your brain. And then if you had a robotic body that enabled you to function socially to some extent, I'd say this was a definite plus. And of course, the whole thing of people who don't want to die not dying. in virtually every sphere of human activity, this is seen as a great advantage. I think the ethical issues come later, the sort of other things beyond that were talked about, the idea of sort of uploading into computers. And there it mainly comes not so much because you're immortal or because you're in a different form, but mainly because you can be copied. You can be copied, your identity can be split, you can be trained in something, copied in that. One super lawyer could take over every single lawyer's job in the world, and that's just a sort of feeling of the kind of ethical issues that come out. So personally, I think the whole timeline is wildly optimistic, because they don't yet know what they don't know about this. But I think it's a worthy project. But I think the ethical issues come at the next stage, and they come quite strongly.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in the heart of London. I'm Tim Walklate, and today I'm hosting a debate posing the question, could the line between humans and machines soon be blurred? I'm joined in the studio by Dr. Stuart Armstrong from the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University, Professor Atta Bardi, who's the chair of the International Companion Robotics Institute at the University of Reading, and Jack Schofield, who's the computer editor of The Guardian newspaper. And joining us on the phone is Father Georgi Zavashinsky from the Russian Orthodox Mission in Belfast. And let me just bring in Father Georgi here. I mean, what does the Russian Orthodox Church have to say on matters such as these?
Stuart said of the morality as a question, which is now it's not time for moral questions. I wouldn't agree with that because we start from our moral decisions. Actually, human being acts on behalf of our heart, of our first movement is arising from within our personality. And then we put our brains, our mind, logic, ability to learn, to understand, to explain everything, and then we go with technologies. So moral issues, ethical, philosophical, would be put on the table right now before we proceed with such a project. Otherwise, it really could lead us into madness.
Well, we will come back to that in a second, but I'd like to bring in Jack Schofield here. Now, you obviously write on computer-related topics all the time. Now, is artificial intelligence and ideas such as Itskov's, are they gaining momentum? Is this the next big frontier?
Well, clearly it is, but then I don't think that Itskov is that far advanced. And I don't see that there's any ethical issue with trying to save people's heads or brains. If you were a rescuer at a plane crash or a train crash, you would obviously try and save whole human beings, but you wouldn't neglect people because they'd lost a leg or an arm. As medical knowledge increases, we try to support people with fewer and fewer original bits left. Now, it's astonishingly difficult, and as far as I know, impossible to support a head without a body, which is the first problem that Itskov has. You know, I wish I was a medical expert, because there must be hundreds of hospitals around the world who are working on this problem. Now, the second thing is, if you've got a paraplegic, if you've got a Christopher Reeve whose brain is clearly working but whose body is not, well, why would you not want to provide them with robotic limbs? You know, I mean, clearly we give people, if somebody's lost a leg, we try our best to give them a working robotic leg. If they've lost an arm, we give them an arm. We give them glasses. We give them hearing aids. We perpetually add things to the human body to correct its failings. So, you know, why would we not try to give them a whole body rather than just parts? I mean, it seems to me this is not just logical, but it's absolutely ethically the correct thing to do. No argument, really, is there?
Well, Atta, shall I bring you in now? You
Yes.
mentioned about hormones and other things.
essentially, we have nutrition, circulation, regulatory, and lymphatic exchanges that have to happen, and it is difficult to see how these challenges will be overcome in a totally robotic embodiment. Essentially, when there's only the brain and everything else is disembodied.
As far as I know, nobody's actually managed to support a head.
Indeed.
Not even an animal head. I mean, presumably
Yeah.
a mouse, for instance.
Yes.
If you could support a mouse head, that would be a start. But we're nowhere near that. We're nowhere near that level of expertise.
But I must say, your argument is fine to the extent that essentially you are arguing for advanced prosthesis, advanced support that can extend, beyond a single limb to multiple limbs, etc. Now, so far, so good. But this project essentially heralds, if they get successful as they wish to, a whole new era where we have essentially got everything downloaded onto silicon, and your persona is then essentially in this displaced or embodied somehow in this artifact. Now, a human being has, as its, essentially as its grounding for socialization and for relating to others, a whole Cartesian, emotional Cartesian system, whereby, for example, it can read other people's emotional state. It's emotionally intelligent, it's socially intelligent, and it has a sense of groundedness in some patterns that are established over millennia, in patterns of relating, patterns of power, patterns of governance. I think Stuart mentioned something about, said the ethics of it are actually becoming more of an issue when the second stage, namely the total silicon download, if you like, takes over. And I mentioned earlier on the questions of identity and governance, and they're all wrapped up in that.
Yes.
Because.
But if you look back, we've had 20 years of people like Hugo de Garis doing, running brain labs, trying to build brains.
Yes.
So we've had at least 2 decades of hundreds and possibly thousands of researchers working on this, and as far as I can tell, getting nowhere at all.
Indeed.
Now, the idea that Dimitri can come along with 30 researchers and suddenly solve this problem, I think it would be miraculous if he could, and therefore I basically, discount it completely. I don't think it is possible in 10 years. It may not be possible in 40 years.
Yeah.
Interesting to find out.
Well, let's. Let me bring in Stuart just for a second. You look like you want to say something.
I just want to say that one of the reasons that I really like the project, which I don't think will work, but I really like it, is because if you actually manage to transplant brains into robots, then we'll actually start thinking seriously about the ethics of what you were talking about what happens when you start copying. As long as it's... I fear that if we don't actually target things like human transplants, immortality, the copying will sneak up on us and it'll arrive one day when we weren't ready for it.
But surely we don't need the personality. I mean, from what I remember of expert systems, the idea was that you developed an expert system that could replace the decision-making of, say, a surgeon or a lawyer or a judge, and you eliminated all the personal... you don't need the human character. So it's perfectly possible to have the world's... It strikes me as quite a good idea to have all the world's lawyers put out of business instantly by a very large, complicated version of the IBM Watson that won Jeopardy. Some artificial intelligent machine that just knows things but doesn't have fights with its wife and... say rude things on the tube or whatever.
Does it not sound a bit like The Matrix to you?
Well, that's fine. I mean, not anything that makes lawyers unemployed is absolutely a wonderful idea.
That's another subject.
I mean, it would be lawyers, researchers,
Yes.
journalists,
Yes.
presidents.
No, you'll never replace
politicians.
Well,
And pop
let's.
stars.
We're closely running out of time quite quickly, and I want to go quickly onto the subject of the Nuffield Council on Bioethics and its consultation that's been launched this week, and we touched on brain intervention, if we can call it that. And Stuart, I'd just like to ask you. I mean. looking at technology that's being developed currently, intervention into the brain for curing life-threatening diseases, for example. I think Parkinson's has been mentioned. Isn't this a great thing? I mean, let's take a look at somebody like Stephen Hawking, who's assisted by technology. I mean, what's your response to that?
Well, I agree completely. It's all a great thing. I mean, there's always niggles. You might lose a little bit of poetry. You might lose a bit of challenge of life or something like that. But on the other hand, you take people that had things they couldn't do, were sort of paralyzed, were restricted, were trembling, and now they can function better. In this respect, it's also the positive.
And Father Georgi?
The Church support any real scientific achievements and accepts it with all, if it's really moral and not against ethical law. There is no question from the Church side to put something against it.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. So we're running out of time, and I've got one final question that I'd like to put to all of you.
Uh-huh.
I'd like to end with a quote from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's story, The Poison Belt. I don't know if any of you've ever read it. It goes like this. It says, "As to the body, we do not mourn over the parings of our nails, nor the cut locks of our hair, though they were once part of ourselves. Neither does a one-legged man yearn sentimentally over his missing limb. The physical body has rather been a source of pain and fatigue to us. It is the constant index of our limitations. Why then should we worry about its detachment from our psychical selves?" So my final question, is the body simply a husk that transports the brain around? Atta?
No, I believe that the body mediates a sense of identity. It may be true that we may feel, as you just read the quote saying, that we wouldn't mourn over the loss of a limb. In fact, the brain does, and there are stories of people who have to relieve itching limbs by using a mirror in order to actually, if they've lost the right leg, they have to put a mirror in front of the left leg to actually attempt to, scratch the itch. There's multi-level intimacy between the brain sense of awareness of self and its embodiment. And, certainly I wouldn't feel that the brain is totally divorced from the sense of self that it gets through a person's sense of identity, part of which is their physical embodiment.
Stuart?
Yeah, well, the body is definitely a part of the identity for some people, a lot more than others. I just feel that it's not the major part, and that if you transplant the brain into a robot, you'll lose part of your identity, but you'll keep the most important part, and you'll be able to reconstitute your identity around your new embodiment, if it were to work, of course.
Mm-hmm. Jack?
I don't think there's a genuine answer. I think there's a lot of imaginative ways of thinking about the difference between appearance and reality and whether it matters. We all get enormous pleasure from physical things. So if you could wire the brain so that you could have the illusion that it was having the same physical pleasures, would it matter whether they were real or not?
Father Georgi?
Yeah, certainly body is a part of our personality. So therefore, body, brains, they are certainly on multi-level, and there is no way to separate them somehow and accept new body and adjust your own brains, your own personality to new body. It is important to keep your own body and to live your own life and to be able to accept eternity given by God.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave this literally mind-boggling issue for now. So joining me in this discussion was Dr. Stuart Armstrong, Professor Atta Badi, Jack Schofield from The Guardian, and Father Georgi Zavershinsky. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in the heart of London. Stay with us. We'll be back shortly.